Mary Earps was the number one at Reading when I started, and she's obviously gone on to win FIFA Goalkeeper of the Year and the Euros. Definitely working at a national team level is up there. Even longer from that, I want to work in the Premier League. But I think there's a lot of value that goalie coaches can add to a coaching staff, and not just teaching people to catch it and kick it. Within my first week, I took a first team training session, and that was so enjoyable. It was great, and the first team keepers were so attentive and gave me every bit of respect, which I'm so grateful for. Just because we've said no to you now doesn't mean that it's always going to be a no. If in 6 months you've worked on the stuff that we've said, then we'll have another look at you. I never got invited back.
You alright, mate? How are you today?
Warm, very warm.
Good. Yeah, it's hot in England today, I can't lie. It's like 30 degrees. Just introduce yourself to the viewers and myself.
So I'm Craig McCreeth. I'm currently the Head of Academy Goalkeeping at Shrewsbury Town. UEFA licensed goalie coach. That's me really.
So we're going to rein it all the way back to the start. How did you get into football, and who got you into football at an early age?
My dad sent me along on a Saturday morning just to try and get me out, get me active. I wasn't the most athletic as a kid. So I was put in the position that requires the least amount of physical exertion and ended up being slightly average at it. Played at some grassroots for a little while locally. Signed at QPR. Was lucky enough to play with Raheem Sterling for a little while. Moved on to grassroots again from there. Didn't get signed again. Went to grassroots, played a year up, which was a good experience for me. Played at Harris St Mary's and won a few trophies and stuff with them. Went to Watford for a little while.
We'll just stop it right there. We're going a bit too fast for now. So, obviously you said you played a lot of football growing up.
Yeah.
What other sports did you play growing up, and was football your main focus?
Played a bit of badminton growing up.
We need to have a badminton game at some point, mate. If you play badminton, I need a challenge.
Next time I'm back down, we'll play. I played that. My dad played a lot. So we got into that as a family, and we all used to play on an afternoon at the weekends. Other than that, I didn't really play any other sports.
So you said you played in Sunday League,
yeah,
and you mentioned Harris St Mary's. From what ages were you at Harris St Mary's, and how did you progress onto that too? You said you played for a few different academies. Yeah. So how did you progress from Sunday League to different academies?
So I was at Harris St Mary's for a couple of seasons. I was an under 14 at the time, but played for the under 15s. And then went on to Watford. I was in one of their kicks programs, and ended up moving into the player development centre, and then played a stadium game at Vicarage Road, and got scouted from there.
So from Sunday League to getting picked up by Watford, saying you were at that kind of program, how did you introduce yourself into that kind of program, or was it just by luck you managed to find yourself in there?
They were just running one locally, and it was free. So I thought, it's just an extra night of playing some football. So I went down, had a little kick around, and the coach was actually a goalie coach as well. And he sort of recognised that there was a little bit of something about me, and then put me in contact with the player development centre.
So what were your experiences like getting from that starter programme to the development centre? What was that process like?
It was just a conversation really. So I used to just rock up to the kick session on my own, but they asked my dad to come down once and made contact with him, and then they put us in touch with the goalie coach at the development centre, and then I went down a couple of training sessions, and then it was at the end of the season, played in a stadium game against the academy, and obviously impressed the right people.
So you said it was the end of the season, so what was your first kind of few days, few weeks like? Because obviously all of those players are integrated within each other already. So was it difficult for you to get integrated within a group, or just tell me about your experiences through that?
With the development centres, it was quite a high turnover of players at the time. So they'd get you in, you'd be in for sort of 6 to 10 weeks, and you'd either go into the academy on trial, or they'd sort of, in the nicest way possible, move you on and get a new bunch of players in. So it was quite a high turnover, but they were really open and honest, and you knew what you were getting into. When you went for your first session, it was like, right, you've kind of got 6 to 10 weeks to impress us. Otherwise, there's nothing there.
So what was your first session like? What were you feeling? Were you nervous, excited, or a mixture of both?
It was a long time ago now, but...
So how old were you at the time?
I'd have been 14.
Okay.
I'd definitely been nervous. I think even thinking back to when I was finishing my playing days and playing career, I would still get nervous before games. I think it's natural as a goalkeeper that you feel nerves. It's how you channel your nerves and how you use your nerves that separates an average keeper from a good keeper.
So at the time you were at the development centre, how long were you there for? Was it, you said it was 6 to 10 weeks. Were you there 10 weeks, 6 weeks?
I can't remember. It might have been about 6 weeks, and it fell nicely that they had a showcase game against the academy players that I was asked to played a half, and got called into a room afterwards and told that they wanted me to come and join the academy for pre-season on trial.
So what was that like? Obviously you must have played well in the game. You must have caught their eye in a different number of things as a goalkeeper. So what was that conversation like, and what were you expecting from that conversation?
I didn't really go into the conversation with any expectations. Like I was 14. I'd just played at Vicarage Road, and I'd been and watched Premier League games there. So I think I was still a little bit giddy.
Okay.
So to then get that conversation, I was kind of like on cloud nine. It didn't really sink in until I was driving up in the car for my first session at London Colney.
So what was that like? Again, I'm going to ask you many questions like what was that like? So again, what was it like actually having that first session on the way into London Colney? Obviously, how old are you at this point when you're still 15?
I'd have gone and I'd have been 14 at that point.
So you're 14 still, and like what was that like? Obviously, it was a long time ago. So what was that like as a 14-year-old kid getting on your way to your first session in the Watford Academy?
I think going into London Colney, and London Colney is a training ground, as anyone that knows football in the area, it was obviously Arsenal's old training ground. So you're driving into there and you know that there's a lot of good players that have passed along the same footpaths as you and walked in the same areas, and it is a little bit overwhelming, I remember. And I probably didn't give a good account of myself on my first few sessions. There was quite a lot of nerves, but I remember Adi Creamer was the goalie coach, and I remember him, and anyone that's sort of local in sort of the Harrow area, Watford areas will probably know Adi. He's an exceptional coach, and I think I learned a lot from him, not just as a player, but I learned a lot about what a good coach is as well in that period of time.
So what were your best moments at Watford Academy? Like what different things did you manage to achieve, and intrinsically as well? What different things did you manage to achieve there?
I remember playing against some good teams. We played Arsenal. They were next door in a pre-season game, and that was quite a good one with living in a family of Arsenal fans.
Yeah.
I remember walking into the changing room and seeing how differently things were done to what I'd been remembering recently at Grassroots, and you've got team sheets on the wall, and your name's printed out, and you've got a shirt hanging up, and just the little details like that still really stick with me. As the experience was so positive as a player to go in, and I was there for pre-season. I was probably there for a couple of months, and I didn't get positive news. I wasn't signed, but I still felt I left having had a really positive experience, having learned an awful lot. And having a load to take away and take back and work on myself to try and get better and hopefully come back for future opportunities.
So at Watford, what were your toughest moments? Obviously, you said it didn't end well. Obviously, you got the bad news. So what were your toughest moments at Watford, playing on the pitch and off the pitch?
Obviously, being told that you're not going to be signed and this is your last session was tough, and leaving the training ground, driving down the driveway, I remember being a little bit emotional because I'd built such strong bonds with people. It was such a good environment to be in that I really wanted to be there and to stay there. So there's a little bit of disappointment, a bit upset, but I think then there was that motivation to want to get back there. Mm-hmm. They were very open that it's not the be all and end all, and it's not your last. Just because we've said no to you now doesn't mean that it's always going to be a no. If in 6 months you've worked on the stuff that we've said, then we'll have another look at you. I never got invited back.
Yeah, so what happened after Watford? Just give me a few different details. Did you go back to Sunday League? Did you get picked up straight away?
I went back to Sunday League. I went and played for St Joseph's.
I played for St Joseph's as well.
Yeah, and I remember some funny games, some funny stories with them, and it was a much more of a social thing then. While I'd taken so many learnings from Watford, I think the biggest thing I took away was I probably wasn't good enough to make it and make a living out of the game as a player. So I put a lot of effort then back into my schoolwork. Started seeing football as just an enjoyment, just as something to stay active with, and my opinions of the game really did sort of change then.
Okay, so obviously you go from St Joseph's. How long were you at Sunday League for? So what were the obviously there's probably huge comparisons between obviously being at Watford and St Joseph's. Were you not shocked, obviously, because you knew going back to Sunday League, but what kind of experiences, or the different experiences that you had at St Joseph's compared to Watford?
I tried to take a lot of what I'd learned at Watford in terms of how you approach a game, how you prepare for a game, the intensity that you can work at yourself. I tried to take that with me, and I tried to make it quite incestuous within the team. And the first year we ended up having a really good season, and I remember winning an award for manager's player, which was a great, it's great to win those sorts of awards and have those achievements and have your hard work recognised at any level. And I think that was largely down to having taken so much of the experiences I'd learnt at Watford and obviously drawn on as well from when I was at QPR to take to that level. So and a few players.
So as you mentioned QPR, did you go from St Joseph's and you got picked up by QPR after that, or who did you get picked up?
QPR was the first academy I was at.
Okay.
I was at St Joe's. I went to a goalkeeping camp in Essex and ended up getting invited in to train with Tottenham's under-16s.
Okay, so what was that like, again, between the comparisons of Watford and Spurs?
Facility was a big one. We were at Loughton at their training ground. I remember it being an absolute mission to get to.
Yeah.
Right around the M25 at rush hour was not good.
You got to do what you got to do though, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it ended up just logistically not being something that was going to work. Obviously having 3 younger brothers, having 2 parents that work, trying to get to the other side of London during rush hour 3 times a week, it just wasn't feasible whatsoever.
So what were your best memories from Tottenham? Because obviously you said the facilities were great. What other things can you remember from your time at Spurs?
The players, the standard was just, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And I think deep down I wasn't disappointed when I couldn't go back because of the travel commitments, because I knew I was so far off it. I deep down I knew that I wasn't at that level, and that was fine. I think I'd kind of already made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to be a professional football player. So yeah, there wasn't any sort of disappointment or anything like that. I was kind of just like, well, I came into it not expecting anything, so I haven't lost out. So
you had a couple of sessions at Spurs. Did you play anywhere else, or what was the process after that in your mind?
I kind of just focused on my GCSEs up until the end of the season. Made sure I got some good grades to get into college. I had a BTEC programme with football working alongside it lined up, which was something I really wanted to do. So I wanted to make sure I got some good grades to enable myself to get onto that course. So at college, did you manage to keep playing football, or were you just solely focused on the BTEC programme? Yeah, we played football. We had the schedule for training was built around our college timetables, and it was all done with the same education provider and linked with a local football club. And we actually ended up being quite successful. And in the second year, we won a national college championship and progressed really well in the Middlesex Cup, won the League Cup. So we had quite a successful group, and I think there's a few boys that are involved in the game at a decent level at the minute as well. Any shout-outs you want to give out to people that you played with at college? Not really, because I didn't like them. Fair enough. We love the truth at the Chinwag Podcast here. So what different, obviously you mentioned your achievements at college. So obviously you're a coach now. So is that how you got into coaching? Yeah, we did our level 1 and level 1 goalkeeping when I was at college, and AD was one of the tutors at college and was the goalie coach on the programme. So I got back in with him, and I kind of moved down a coaching route. When I was there, we had quite a good link with Barnet Ladies as well, and Tracy Kevins, who was the manager at the time, was the Barnet women's manager, and tutored. And she asked, "Okay, do you mind training? We've got no keeper tonight." And I was like, "Yeah, go on then. Why not? Like, I live around the corner, so yeah, cool." I just was loving training at the time, and
So were you training as a keeper or a coach?
yeah, training as a keeper.
As a keeper, okay.
Yeah, and then they slowly started to ask me to help out on a match day with like warm-ups and stuff, and that was kind of my first real exposure to being a coach in any sort of professional environment.
How did you find the transition going from a player to a coach?
Really tough, to be honest. As a coach, you have to have boundaries, but being a player at the same time, you're trying to flick between being part of the dressing room in one session and then not like being detached and kind of being out of the loop with stuff in the next session. So it was really tough to kind of gauge. And I think particularly in the early days of being a coach, you look and go and reflect, did the boundaries get a little bit crossed at times? And yeah, of course. And I think any coach, if you reflect and they're honest in their reflections, will have moments where they look back and there's things that they would potentially adjust.
So what were your most enjoyable moments at Barnet Ladies?
They won the Middlesex Cup. Yeah, I remember doing the warm-up and they won the Middlesex Cup, and that was the first and only thing I think I've won as a coach. So I should have quit when I was there.
No, you shouldn't have quit. You wouldn't be here if you had quit back then. But so where did you progress from there? So you said you obviously won the Middlesex Cup. That was your best moment at Barnet Ladies. So now obviously you're Shrewsbury Town Academy coach. How did you go from Barnet Ladies, and what was the process going from then to now as Shrewsbury Town Academy coach?
So it was when the WSL licensing came in and they brought in the WSL2. So Barnet Ladies turned into London Bees, and there had to be set requirements for the goalie coach, had to have certain qualifications that I didn't at the time have. So they brought in another goalie coach, and they still sort of kept me around and wanted me to stay sort of involved and linked with them. And I ended up covering a few games.
Was there a frustration when they brought in someone else?
Yes and no. I was really enjoying it, but at the same time I understood that, I don't meet the requirements. They're going into the second highest tier in women's football. I've got no coaching experience, so I can understand why they're going to bring somebody in that's got knowledge, experience, qualifications that I don't have. So
obviously from then, where did you go after London Bees, and what was the process of going to another club as a coach? Because obviously everyone, they don't know, but they see on TV how players leave and go to new clubs. So what was that as a coach like, to go to a new club?
I actually went back.
Okay. Okay.
So they just couldn't get rid of me. I was like a bad smell. The chap that was doing it, Steve Fraser, was actually moving on to a different role, and I ended up following him round about like a bad smell as well. Yeah. So he left and moved on. He went to a role at Watford in the academy. So he left his role with London Bees and Barnet, which opened up a role that they wanted me to take.
So what was that like going, obviously you played at Watford as a kid and now you're going back as a coach. So what was that kind of like on your first day back at Watford as a coach? There was a lot of reflection on the drive in. It was interesting being in the driver's seat and being a coach now, going back and knowing that, I'm here to stay, instead of not knowing how long my stay would be the last time I was there. And it was good. It's nice having experiences myself there to be able to call upon, to share with the players, both positive and negative, to use as examples for them. Probably draw a lot easier on the negatives, because my career didn't amount to anything as a player. So it's easier to go, well, hey, look, if you'd actually worked hard and put the effort in and done the extras, you'd have probably done something. What's the best piece of advice you can give to a player as a coach now? Don't do what everyone else is doing. You've got to do more, because there's someone ahead of you. But if you're only ever matching what they do, you're only ever going to stay so far behind them. But if you're doing more and it's purposeful, you'll close that gap and overtake them. So is that what you portrayed to the players at Watford when you were there? So you gave that advice, and what kind of different experiences did you have with different, obviously, personalities? Because each player is a personality in essence. So what was that like, managing different people? It's all about coaching. For me, is all about understanding the individual,
Everything I do at Watford, everything I did when I moved to Reading, and everything I do now when I'm at Shrewsbury is based around goalkeeping as an individual, not a one-size-fits-all programme. So everything is tailored, everything is specific. I think ILPs and IDPs was something that Watford were really big on when I started coaching there. And I think that, and seeing the benefits that had, was something that really sort of stuck with me and still sticks with me to this day.
So then you moved to Reading Women, and now you're at Shrewsbury and you're an academy coach. So what's the difference between women's football and men's football in your eyes? But your experiences.
There's a lot of differences. I think the players is the biggest one. Mm-hmm. I always found, and I don't know if it's me being really lucky with the players I was fortunate enough to work with in the women's game, I find they're much more grateful and appreciative for any information that they give you or that you give them. Whereas I feel like players in the men's game take things for granted quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And they just expect to have a goalie coach. They just expect you to help them. They expect you to go above and beyond. Whereas at Reading, all the players were so grateful, and I would get thanked after every session, which was the first time that's ever happened to me. And I was kind of like, well, I'm doing my job. This is what I'm paid to do, so you don't need to thank me. But they were just that appreciative that really took me back. It was really like. So
then the follow-up question to that. So why did you leave that kind of setup and then join an academy, a men's academy? So what was your thinking in that?
I'd been at Reading for coming up to 3 years, and I felt like I needed a challenge as a coach. I needed to try something different. I needed to get out of my comfort zone. I felt very comfortable in my role at Reading. For my development at 26, 25, 26, I needed to challenge myself, and I needed to do something to help me as an individual progress in the game. Mm-hmm. And that meant moving away from an environment that was comfortable, moving away from home, and just really putting myself out there.
So was it tough moving away from home and as well going to a new club and going from the female game to the male game again? Was it tough?
It was a lot of change and not a lot of space of time, which was hard, but it kind of forced me to throw in everything into work to keep myself busy and keep myself occupied. I was living in a house share with 10 people because it was the easiest place I could get moved into so that I could just get cracking on with the job, and didn't even really think about myself until sort of Christmas time. I'd been there almost 6 months.
So what have your best experiences been at Shrewsbury Town? Because obviously, as you said, it was a far away from home and a lot of things getting thrown at you at once. So what are the best things that have happened, like your memories so far, obviously because you're still there, so what are the best memories that have happened so far?
There's been loads. There's been loads of stuff that I look back on and I'm like, oh, how I'm so grateful that that's happened. Within my first week, I took a first team training session, and that was so enjoyable. It was great, and the first team keepers were so attentive and gave me every bit of respect, which I'm so grateful for. That Christmas, I didn't come home to see the family because COVID was still a thing. Mm-hmm. And there was COVID at home, so I had to stay up in Shrewsbury, and the first team staff and the first team manager invited me in to work with the first team over Christmas for 2 weeks, and I got to experience 3 match day build-ups, 3 games, away travel, everything at a League One level, which was, for my development as a coach, was such a great period of time, and I did so much learning in that short space of time, not just as a goalie coach but learning from the outfield coaches as well. And then even this season, Portsmouth away with the first team, I had to have a little bit of a sing-song.
I love that.
The night before.
Love that.
But it was great, a little bus journey down, a few free meals, nice hotel, and we drew 1-1 at Fratton Park.
What's the biggest piece of advice that's been given to you as a coach so far in your career?
Don't be a one-trick pony. So I don't see myself as just being a goalie coach. I've got a real sort of passion for set pieces as well. Okay. And they're 2 things that probably bore the hell out of a lot of coaches. They're definitely 2 things that bore a lot of players, but they're 2 things I'm really passionate about and have really thrown myself into. And I think you see now at senior level, a lot of goalie coaches take charge and take a lead around the defensive set pieces. But also don't just be a goalie coach. If I can impact and have a positive impact in defenders or strikers or midfield players, if I see something, I want to say it and I want to help. And I think there's been a bit of reluctancy a lot at the start to make sure I was saying the right thing. But I think there's a lot of value that goalie coaches can add to a coaching staff, and not just teaching people to catch it and kick it.
Looking back now, and as you're a coach, what was your best memories, and what kind of different things did you experience as a player that were the ultimate high?
Definitely winning the under-15 cup final with Harrow St Mary's. That was up there. Winning the league with St Joseph's under-16s. I played for Wembley FC when they had the Budweiser sponsorship, and they did the whole ESPN documentary. And I remembered walking in, it was an FA Cup game, and we had Ray Parlour, Brian McBride, Graham Lasso in the changing room, and I was like a 16-year-old kid walking in to see players that I've watched on TV, and I was just like, damn.
What an experience.
Cool, yeah. Saved a shot from Claudio Canizia in the warm-up as well.
What are the best players you have coached throughout your career?
There's lots of different answers to that. So ability-wise, obviously Marco and Harry and the boys at Shrewsbury are fantastic and rightly deserving of playing at League One level. Jamie Stevens at the time at Barnet was one of the best shot stoppers around, and definitely kept them in League Two when I was with them. But there's lots of players who have gone on to achieve some fantastic things. Mary Earps was the number one at Reading when I started, and she's obviously gone on to win FIFA Goalkeeper of the Year and Euros, so that's fantastic for her.
So what's that like for you as a coach, seeing players you've coached in the past achieve such high success?
I was only a very small part of her journey, and I think as a coach you're only ever a very small part of a player's journey. So I don't really get too caught up in their achievements, because it's not mine. It's they've done it. They've gone out and done it, not me. I've had my time. I've had my chance and didn't do anything with it. So it's theirs, and I'm just here as a coach to support them along the way.
So before we finish the podcast today, where do you see yourself coaching? Not a specific club, for example. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
It's a really difficult question, because 5 years ago I wouldn't expect to be where I am. I think the big thing for me is I want to have done my Advanced Youth Award, and I want to have done my Outfield A licence. They're the big things for me. I think they're the only things that are really set in stone over the next few years that I want to do and achieve. Longer term, definitely working at a national team level is up there. Even longer from that, I want to work in the Premier League.
So before we finish completely, look into your camera, tell people watching, the viewers, tell them what your socials are and tell them to follow you.
My socials are really boring because I don't post, but it's Craig McCreeth on Twitter.
I'd like to thank you for joining me on the Chinwag Podcast this evening, and I hope you've enjoyed your time on the podcast today. So that's the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed hearing Craig's story today. If you did like the podcast, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my channel. Follow Craig on his socials, and don't forget, I'll see you later for more. Thank you, mate.
No worries.
Appreciate it. Lovely, jubbly.